Let's raise the big questions once again here on the news today. Is this the end of the road for Bangladesh's longest-serving Prime Minister? Has Hasina paid the price for turning an autocrat? And is there a lesson in that for leaders across the world? What does Hasina's ouster mean in the near term for India? An unstable Bangladesh, bad news for India. Some of the questions that we will raise tonight. I'll be joined by several guests, but I want to go to the first guest. I spoke to her a short while ago because she's a newsmaker. Rumeen Farhana is former leader of the opposition in Bangladesh, of the BNP. Appreciate your joining us, Ms. Farhana. Sheikh Hasina stepping down as Prime Minister just months after she was re-elected in an election you and many other parties boycotted and described as rigged. Back then, I remember you were quoted as saying an election without uncertainty, where people lack the power to determine their representatives through voting, is a mere facade. Do you feel today vindicated that Hasina has left the country in this manner?
It's a victory of the nation. The whole nation was waiting for this day for last many years. So we all are celebrating today. You know, for last 15 years or so, people could not exercise their voting right. So they live as the second citizen of this country. So it was a day of victory, not for me only, but for the nation as well. And after 1971, we feel like in 2024, we are liberated again. I mean, it's our second liberation. That's how we feel.
You know, you're saying it's a second liberation there, Farhana, but the fact is that Hasina stepped down after days of violent protests, reportedly being pushed out by the army. Is an active role being played by the army a good sign for democracy, given what the kind of role the army has played in the past in Bangladesh?
You see, there was no democracy in Bangladesh for the last 15 years. In 2014, there was a so-called election where 153 seats were elected before the election day. So it was basically a mockery with the nation. The same happened in 2018, where the election took place in the midnight. And in 2024, it was Hasina versus Hasina. So for last 3 terms, there was no election in Bangladesh. So there was no democracy, there was no freedom of speech, there was no human rights. There was no freedom of assembly or to do politics in a normal environment. So now we are thinking of building this nation again. We will build a new Bangladesh, inshallah. We will make a new Bangladesh.
You know, you're saying you'll build a new Bangladesh. You're saying you'll build a new Bangladesh, but there are those, especially supporters of Hasina, who are seeing a foreign hand in these protests, saying there are all radical elements that were supporting parties like yours. Hasina herself has once said, in fact, before this quota issue surfaced, if I allow a certain country to build an airbase in Bangladesh, then I would have had no problem. She didn't name the United States, but there are people who are saying the US also has had an interest in fueling these protests. Was there a foreign hand, ma'am?
See, since she fled from the country, since we didn't get any opportunity to ask her the questions, we don't know whom she indicated. But the reality is, it is a democratic country. It is People's Republic of Bangladesh, and people's will is the last word. So people refused her long back, and eventually she had to flee from the country. So that becomes the reality now. And now the people will decide who will be in power, who will be in the parliament, how the country will move forward. It will be the decision of the people.
Rumeen, you're saying the people will decide who will form the government, but as those visuals that I showed, the people have taken over the streets. There has been arson, there has been looting in the last 24 hours. Now the army says it will form the interim government. Will you join it? Will your government join it? Will your party, BNP, join it if you get a chance? And do you really think free and fair elections can now take place in this atmosphere?
You see, it's only few hours now that we have been liberated. I am just purposefully using the word liberated. Yes, we have been liberated. It's only a few hours now. So it's too early to make any comments, number one. Number two, if the nation feels that they need me for any reason, if they think that I can be of any help, I'm always ready to serve my nation in whichever way the people want me to. And as you have seen that for last 17 years, me and my family have suffered a lot. I was the most vocal person from the opposition. So we tried our level best. Every single member of this country, every single person of this country, they played their role, and some way or other, if they are not the part of the regime, they suffered. So yes, I'm with them. I'm always with the sufferer.
What will you say, though, to those who warn that what we are seeing on the streets of Bangladesh could eventually result, or could result in the return of the rise of hardline Islamists in that country? Is that an exaggerated fear?
You see, there is no hardline Islamists in Bangladesh. People of this country, they follow religion, but they're not fanatic. They are not extremists, for God's sake. So I don't think that there will be a rise of extremism. There was a fear of this rise if Hasina continues. Since she fled and she gave up, I don't see any reason why the extremists will come up.
Okay, let me leave it there. The former leader of the opposition, Rumin Farhana, joining me, giving us a sense of where she and her party stand, claiming that this is a moment of victory for the people of Bangladesh. Let me leave it there, Rumin. We'll wait and see how this develops. I'm joined by more guests now live this time. Subir Bhaumik is senior journalist and author. He's tracked Bangladesh for decades now. KC Singh, former Secretary MEA, is with us. Zulkarnain Sair is Bangladesh researcher based in London. Arafatul Islam is Bangladeshi German multimedia journalist with the Deutsche Welle Bengali service. Joins me from Bonn in Germany. Appreciate all of you joining us at this moment. Let me first come to you, KC Singh. Give us a perspective of how you see what's happened on the streets of Bangladesh and Dhaka affecting us here in India. We have this high-level meeting already going on at the Prime Minister's office. What are India's options?
Rajdeep, I don't see the surprise here. I think this has been building up for some time. On the 9th of January, I wrote an op-ed saying the election results call for caution, not complacency. But the Indian government was busy that time with Ram Mandir, then election, then Charso Par, then something else. The bells were ringing even then because the opposition had boycotted. The government had put up, Awami League had put up fake candidates as opposition candidates and got a massive mandate. Now, that kind of authoritarian rule works as long as the economy is okay. As long as you're not, there is not terrible amount of divisiveness in the society. But the divisiveness is ingrained in Bangladesh because Ziaur Rahman, the founder of the BNP and a general who ruled after Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, I think Awami League has always felt that he had a hand to play, maybe not directly, in the assassination of Sheikh Mujib. So this enmity has been there. It's not been just normal opposition between one party and the other. And then the behavior of the government of Bangladesh, you lock up Begum Zia, you have all kinds of cases. It sounds familiar as the kind of thing we see happening in the Indian states. Now, if you do that, if you start going after your opponents with cases, then democracy is already in a tumble. And then I think we were happy. What she did was she played us against China. So we didn't say anything to her. We said, that's all right. Americans were making some noise. We said, no. But she's secular, but she's against the Islamic elements. But I said in that article, I said, what happens is when you keep the lid on it, when it blows up, the repercussions will be very serious. Why are we surprised? We should have had a game plan. We should have known where it was going. And we should have known how to play this game in the last 6 months.
You're saying this deadly cocktail of divisiveness and autocracy has resulted in this moment and we should have seen it coming rather than in a way being silent and allowing it to play out in the way it has. Zulkarnain Sair, you're a Bangladeshi researcher based in London. Do you see this as a moment? We heard the opposition leader claiming this is a moment of victory. Is it really that? Or does this portend danger for Bangladesh, this kind of street level protests that have resulted in a prime minister being removed?
Well, what you see on the streets are mostly jubilant crowds, mostly jubilant people, happy people, who feel that they have liberated themselves from an oppressor, who have been ruling ruthlessly since last 15 years. There is no doubt that under Sheikh Hasina's regime, there were no free and fair election in Bangladesh for the last 15 years. And I also must note, as our neighbor, India's government have literally failed to ensure that Bangladesh holds free and fair democratic elections. So it is not only a failure for Bangladeshi on Sheikh Hasina's part. I would also say that Indian diplomats assigned in Dhaka and Indian Ministry of Interior, who always have been very close to our government, could have saved this situation had they been cautious about holding free and fair elections, and if they ensured that Sheikh Hasina is what Sheikh Hasina was doing over the years was not really correct. You know, it's a country of 170 million people. Sheikh Hasina have been holding elections, one-sided elections, since 2014. 2014 election, there was no opposition. 2018, the ballot boxes were sealed at night. 2023 election, absolutely one-sided election. So India, as the bigger country and who does have certain interest in Bangladesh, could have played a better role.
So you're saying India should have intervened in some way, or India should have put pressure on Sheikh Hasina to have ensured free and fair elections. Of course, that's easier said than done, given the kind of situation that exists in that country in recent years. Subir Bauming, did India make its mistake in putting all its eggs in Sheikh Hasina's basket in recent years?
I would agree with Zulkarnain that, you know, at the end of the day, as KC Singh was saying, we have some similar problems in India, but at least elections here are fair, which is why you see the result. Even the almighty BJP got the shock, you know, in the recent election. But if elections are not held, it's like a pressure cooker, it builds up. And as KC rightly said, still the economy is doing well. Now, since the, COVID, the economy is not doing well. In the last 4 or 5 years, Bangladesh economy has been taken over by cronies. I've written stories about Salman F. Rahman and all these people. How these cronies have taken over the economy. It's a game of loot across the board. And therefore, when it pinches, when common people tell you, I have to say it in Hindi, not in Bangla, my mother, that Eid ka din bhi gosht naseeb nahi ho raha hai, people don't like it. So, you know, it starts as a student movement, but you see the masses piling on because different people have different...
No, do you see it as a mass movement? Are you saying it's a mass... No, are you saying it's a mass movement? Do you believe what's happened on the streets of Bangladesh a mass movement or instigated by the opposition?
No, this is all nonsense, instigated by the opposition. All opposition...
There is no opposition in Bangladesh.
We like to fish in
opposition doesn't exist.
When you have farmers' agitation here, you see the Congress running in. So, you know, if there is a movement which is, you know, sort of which starts as a student movement, in Bangladesh has a long history of student movement. The politicians follow. It's the students who take the lead. You know, Bangladesh from 1952, students have taken the lead in all these movements. You know, it's a very Bengali phenomenon in some ways. And therefore, to assume that, you know, the opposition will try to fish in troubled waters. They'll try to take advantage. But here, if you look at the organizers of the movement, they're not political people. They're students. And you have 56 people. Here is a movement which is largely leaderless. You don't have one big leader leading the movement. You have different people in all kinds.
Let me take what you've just said.
The important thing is the way it was handled, the arrogance of power.
Okay.
On day one when the court judgment came, if she went out to these boys and told them to come to the table and say that, you know, in 2018, I decided to scrap the quotas, but here is a complication created by a court judgment. We'll appeal in the Supreme Court, which she finally got it done. She should have said it then. She said, so Rajakar and Bacha, they only, you know.
So you're saying she should have, Shubir, just a minute. You're saying she should have negotiated with the students. She could have worked out a solution. It's the arrogance of power that's played out. Arafatul Islam, Do you agree with that? That in a way, this is a popular movement. This is not opposition or foreign sponsored. This has organically grown from below after 15 years of what many believe has slowly moved towards being an elected autocracy.
Yes, yeah, I think so. It is definitely a mass movement, and I don't see any influence by any foreign power or local politician or the opposition party, because it's clearly, we can see that the students led this protest throughout the weeks, and there were massive casualties, deaths. And
but could she have done something differently? Could she have? Could Sheikh Hasina?
Of course.
What could she have done?
She could have done. Yeah, she could have solved this issue last month or even in June, because when this High Court rule came, that they say the High Court said that you have to reinstate the quota system, but at the same time, this ruling also said that the government can change the ratio of the quota. So the government could have changed the ratio, and the issue would have solved there. So, but she didn't do that. Instead of, solving it. Instead of finding an amicable solution, she preferred to use force, and she tried to forcefully disperse all those protesters. Her party members attacked these protesters, so it turned violent. And altogether, we see that all those discontent among people because of this democratic backsliding of Bangladesh, because of this human rights, poor human rights records, because of this economy. So almost people from every sector joined there. So it's not only political parties. Students joined this protest. Students led this protest, but I have seen other professionals joining in. The country I am in, Germany, like there are over 20,000 Bangladeshi citizens living, studying, working in Germany. Many of them also protested, even in Germany. They are saying that it should not be this way. Why are you? There are like massive casualties, and according to UNICEF, at least 32 children were killed in the past week. So that's the lowest figure by UNICEF. So all these things, why should these kids will be killed?
You've got even the likes of Muhammad Yunus, Nobel laureate, some of Bangladesh's most distinguished citizens, all coming out strongly against the way they believe Sheikh Hasina has handled this situation. Just to explain to our viewers and give you a sense of how this has happened. Remember, there was a 30% quota which was there for those who were seen to be inheritors of freedom fighters, and on July 1st, in protest against that rule, after a court ruling, students started blockades. They demanded changes in the rule. Hasina dismisses the protests as a waste of time, doesn't take them seriously enough. The protests gather momentum, violence intensifies. 6 protesters are killed in clashes first on the 16th of July, and the students reject Hasina's appeal for calm, and by then, even though her party has gone to the court, it's not good enough. The protests escalate, a government building is torched. The Supreme Court then rules against reintroducing these job quotas. So that was the hope that would have sorted the issue, but the students went ahead, demanded a complete removal of any quotas for those who were part of the 1971 freedom fight. Army then sided with the protesters on August 4th, and that was the turning point. 68 protesters were killed in the clashes yesterday, and the final protest march was to take place today in Dhaka, and as it approached the Prime Minister's residence, she fled the country. K.C. Singh, let's come back to what we are hearing. There seems to be a consensus that Sheikh Hasina botched this up and botched it up badly. From an Indian perspective, surely our High Commission in Dhaka and indeed the government would have known what was happening. This is one of the few countries in the neighborhood with which we've had a strong relationship in the last decade. Is that the reason why India was reluctant in a way to act, to demand from Sheikh Hasina a free and fair election, or ensure that the students were in a way pacified?
Look, Rajdeep, I've said she very shrewdly played China against India. And BJP's priorities are very clear there. And secondly, she said, I'm opposing the Jamaat-e-Islami, which has been close to Pakistan, which is a right-wing party, which is involved with militancy, terrorism. She's hanged a few of them, leaders of Jamaat-e-Islami, for collaboration with Pakistan. All that was well. But what she had to do was, after you have obtained what you think is recompense, you start then building bridges. You start then reaching out. Now, you can't make multiple mistakes. So what she did was, she brought all her opponents together. Youth have started it. Jamaat-e-Islami was already sulking. They were in a corner because their leadership had been decimated and decapitated. And BNP was locked up. The son of general is sitting in England, I think, and Khaleda Zia is at home.
No, but did
under home
India do
arrest.
the right thing?
No, if you
Did
do
India,
that-
Casey, do the right thing by backing Hasina in the belief that Sheikh was a bulwark against these potential extremist, so-called anti-India forces?
Well, that's precisely the mistake that I'm pointing out, that when Americans do it time and again. It's not that India has done it. They make this mistake. How did Arab Spring start, which brought down 3 dictators? It was one fruit seller who's beaten up by the police in Tunisia. And then you see, that means when you're already having cracks in a society, there's a lot of disenchantment. It needs a spark. The students provided the spark and she misread it. She's not read it. But what are we doing in Delhi? As I told you, I wrote a piece in January. 6 months ago, I tweeted and 50,000 people have read it. And the article's title was Caution and Not Complacency. At that stage, NSA has gone to Hindon now. NSA should have been in Dhaka then and telling them, ma'am, I think you need to make sure that all these forces do not coalesce, do not worsen it. You have to soften your stand. You have to reach out to the opposition. You have to create divisions in them and therefore create a bridge. Don't shut all the doors. Otherwise, you'll have an explosion. Did we have that chat with her? I don't know. If we didn't, why not? Is it because we thought then she'll say, no, I'm giving this contract to China. I will bring China in. So I think she was using the China factor. And therefore, India was a little cautious in not pushing her beyond a point.
Let me get my guest in once again from there in London at this moment. Zulkarnain, your views to what you're just hearing. Are you hopeful that this turmoil now is over, or do you fear it will worsen?
Well, I'm hopeful that it will get better because the crowd that you see here, like they have had their ultimate explosion, like the ultimate explosion that, like, which led to all this mass uprise was.
So you see the streets now becoming quieter with the army now fully in charge?
I think it will, like, I think in coming days, once there is a caretaker government or interim government formed, and if that is accepted by all the bodies, I think automatically it would tone down.
Okay.
Because the explosion.
Let me at this moment also welcome another guest who's joining us. Veena Sikri has been former Indian ambassador, High Commissioner to Bangladesh. I appreciate your joining us, ma'am. KC Singh was earlier telling us that he believes that India should have read the warning signals in January itself. Some of our Bangladeshi guests are also saying we should have put pressure on Sheikh Hasina to ensure free and fair elections. Has India been behind the curve and been caught napping in a way?
Let me say 2 points quite clearly in answer to both those queries. Firstly, the elections were open, but the BNP chose not to participate. Now, you cannot choose not to participate and then say that they were not a participatory elections. As far as the Jamaat-e-Islami is concerned, they were debarred because of a High Court decision, which was a long pending case on their viability as a political party, because they do not accept the constitution of Bangladesh as being higher than their own party constitution. So the 2 largest opposition parties did not take part for different reasons. So neither of these reasons were the doing of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Coming to the present problem, when you're describing the situation, yes, it did begin as a students' quota reform movement. But that quota reform movement was on an issue on which they were on the same page with Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Actually, it was in 2018, former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina herself abolished the quota. For 6 years, there was no quota. When the High Court in June of this year reversed the Sheikh Hasina decision, she went to the Supreme Court. And on 21st of July, the Supreme Court gave a verdict that the quota would be reduced to 5% with 2% extra. In the meanwhile, it is the political parties with the Chhatra League from the Awami League, the Shibir from the Jamaat-e-Islami, and the BNP, they got onto the street and they took over this entire issue.
So you don't agree with Casey's argument that there were cautionary signs in January itself? That in January itself, the manner in which the election had been conducted had led to an element of polarization, and that only needed a as they would say, it just was a volcano waiting to erupt.
The polarization has been there for 50 years. The vote bank is divided in Bangladesh with 35% with the Awami League, 35% with the BNP, a few percentage with the Jamaat-e-Islami, and the rest are the undecided. This polarization has been getting worse and worse and worse. Please don't forget, there were the two military dictators, General Ziaur Rahman, who created the BNP, and General Ershad, who created the Jatiyo Dal. So this polarization is not new to Bangladesh. And it has been getting worse and worse. When I was myself posted there, and it was the government of Prime Minister Begum Khalida Zia. I have seen this at first hand. I have seen exactly what you're accusing Sheikh Hasina now happening at that time.
Sure.
And at all times, India has always been interested in the stability and in the continued development and in democracy in Bangladesh. Of course, we've always, the democratic institutions, whether it is judiciary, whether it is the election commission, all these are very much interested in that. But at this moment, to blame the students for this, I think it has morphed into a political, even the Daily Star published yesterday, the numbers, because at that time, up to yesterday, that means day before, but yesterday it came in the papers, that 204 people had died. But of them, 53 were students. The rest were political activists, the rest were civilian policemen, and so on. Of course, after that, we've had even more deaths yesterday and today. And look at what you're showing as visuals. Are these students on the street? I heard Mohammed Yunus saying on another show that these are celebrating, but they are vandalizing the statue of Sheikh Mujib. Sheikh Mujib
you're saying that, but Suvir Bhaumik, you want to respond to what you're hearing from Veena Sikri? She seems to disagree with what many of you are saying. She seems to see this almost a form of anarchy which has taken over the streets. This is not popular protest.
Sorry. This is not anarchy. And it is not instigated by any other third parties. It is been participated by the general people of Bangladesh.
Okay, Zulkarnain, you made that point. You're saying it's general people. Subir, you want to respond to that?
No, I will add three things. First, I will tell you that I've seen several of these movements in Bangladesh, in my own country. At some point, Lumpens do infiltrate this movement. They make hay while the sun shines. The loot part jo hai, this is not done by the students. This is done by the Lumpen elements, the Tokais of Dhaka, as Zulkar will hear me out. These are people who will infiltrate because they will take advantage. Like the political opposition. You can't blame the opposition for not fishing in trouble to others. Every opposition will like to, take advantage of this. So there is an element of, criminal or, this kind of lumpen elements who get into this movement. That is number one. So you see this kind of vandalization. Now you raised a very important point, with Zulkar, and I want to say what I have to say on this. Is this getting peaceful? No, sir. There will be extensive vengeance. Knowing Bangladesh the way I do, I am sure that it's data. People who belong to Awami League, people who belong to Chhatra League, people who have been, big guys for, last 15 years, a lot of them will be targeted.
Okay, so you're saying I take your point. I take your point. You believe that the violence...
So here, I think what Veena says is right. We are interested in the stability. So we should engage the present dispensation in Bangladesh with the army, with the interim government, that minorities and others,
I'm going to, Subir, I have limited time. I just want to get therefore quick comments on the possibility that a destabilized Bangladesh, KC, is bad news for India. In a neighborhood where we've already seen instability with other neighbors, this is the worst possible news. A short, quick answer, KC, and then Veena Sikri.
Absolutely correct, because it gives a possibility for Pakistan and China to step in. China is already there, but once Pakistan comes in, then they start destabilizing the whole of Northeast. The stability that this government has been trying to bring there, because that will be a big regression. So I think that's the biggest problem, and China will come in then more forthrightly and more strongly into the country. So that's what they've been trying to do, which we've been opposing till now.
Veena Sikri, are you equally concerned that a destabilized Bangladesh, possibly with some extremist elements also playing a greater role, is bad news for India?
Yes, as long as the extremist elements are going to be there, it is definitely bad news for India. I think India has to be in close touch with the present army chief, who has made the interim list, and he's hoping that with the interim government being activated, the protesters will be off the streets. But right now, looking at the vandalization, looking at the burning and looting, I was on another channel where they showed police stations being burnt and the weapons being stolen from police stations. That is also happening. So it's an augury for future violence. It's not an augury for everything coming under control. It is a matter of great worry.
So you're saying
India has imposed a curfew and a 200-meter curfew along the border with Bangladesh. So we are hoping to insulate ourselves from any the effects of any impact of any of this instability on the neighboring regions in India.
Okay.
It is indeed a very serious matter.
Let me leave it there. Clearly, this is deeply troubling. Our thoughts, of course, with the people of Bangladesh above all else. Peace should return to a country that has so much of promise at one level, but still finds itself every now and then periodically going through these moments of turbulence. I appreciate all my guests joining us, especially on what it means for India at the moment.